grab me a beer and grab him a coke. We about to sit for an hour, bullshit and tell jokes. And please don't mix it up, cause he done sobered up. Brandon T comedy on your social media feeds. And Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy. Brandon Taz if it's your ex drinking buddy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Brennan Tassif is your ex drinking buddy. I'm your host, Brennan Tassif. If you're new to the program, I'll give you a quick rundown of the show. I used to be everyone's favorite drinking buddy. It was my favorite thing to do, hang out with friends, do drugs, get drunk, get in all sorts of trouble, and reminisce about old stories. I'm sober now, but that is still one of my favorite things to do, is to hang out with friends, talk shit, talk shop, and reminisce about the good old days. Most weeks I will be joined by a guest. This week is no exception, all the way from Los Angeles, Anderson Cowan.
Let's not get crazy. I mean, it's not like I'm coming from Los Angeles. I continue to sit here in Los Angeles, Brennan.
That's true. That is true.
It's not getting insane. Yes.
Well, let's tell everybody what's going on. So, Anderson, you are a filmmaker, podcaster. You were on Loveline as an engineer for many, many years.
Too many. Way too many. Yeah.
Tell everybody, plug everything you got. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff.
All right. So I fill my weeks these days with trying to be a good dad, trying to be a good husband. But I also spend a lot of time watching movies. But that's what I got to do for the shows that I do. So I do the Film Vault. That's my big money maker. That's the one that's been going on for 12 years or so. Actually, longer than that now. But we talk movies every single week. We try and shine a light on smaller movies and as well as the big ones. And we review movies at the top, and then we do our top 5 from various categories. We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different top 5s, like, everything from like top 5
most disturbing.
Yeah, top 5 most disturbing is one of our most popular ones, where we talked about some of the most effed up movies we've ever seen. And then I also do cinematics with Greg Srzewasti, who's an actual Broadcast Film Critics Association member. He actually votes on stuff, and he watches movies professionally, which is weird and awesome. And then I also do the After Disaster, which is, I think, how you came across me originally many years ago when I was associated with Loveline. I started in radio in the mid 90s. And the thing about radio is, if you just kind of show up, there's a place called the Magic Castle out here, and it's like very exclusive. It's kind of, I call it the Nerd Castle. It's a lot of nerds.
Members only, isn't it?
Members only, yes, unless you get an invite. But if you get one of those elusive invites, once you get in there, you'll get another invite when you're there, almost like on the way out the door. It's obligatory to almost give you like a little card that lets you come back with friends. So once you get in once, your foot's in the door, you can literally just, keep going back. That's kind of how it is with radio. If you're lucky enough to like meet somebody in the business and they invite you down to the studio, this used to be valuable information before that entire industry nosedived. Now it's not. I mean, you run from radio. If you're thinking about getting into radio, think harder about that. But yeah, I got an invitation to go down and check out a guy's show who I was obsessed with. I listened to Scott Farrell on the Bench religiously, and then I met him at a remote, and he liked me and said, "Come down, check out the studio." I did, and then I just never left. I went there probably 4 to 5 nights a week for 6 months before finally he fired somebody and gave me their job. And I learned everybody's job, and I just it was great. It was that's how I started my 20 plus year radio career, which led to everything else that I do, including the movie that I made.
I was going to say, because that's how I actually originally found you, from the Film Vault, believe it or not. That's when I got into podcasting like long time ago, probably like in the late 2000s, 2010 era. And I started listening to different podcasts, and I was trying to find like good podcasts. So believe it or not, I listened to Carolla's podcast, and I was like, I really don't like this, but Bald Brian was on it, and I think he had mentioned something about the Film Vault or something like that. Or
what would make you listen to something? First of all, Brian is by far and away the worst part of the Corolla podcast, as far as I can tell, because he's Brian.
Well, I just went to the charts, and Corolla was at the top. So I was like, oh, let me listen to this. Was. So I listened to a couple of those, and I wasn't really a huge fan of it, but I could have sworn that's how I found the Film Vault. Was
so you never listened to Loveline?
No, never. Huh. I only ever listened to Loveline when I was like trying to listen to you guys. Like
after you discovered us, that's pretty sweet. You came in the back door.
Yeah. So after I discovered, like, there were some times where I would log on and there would like Loveline would be going a little longer. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, where the pad boys at? Like, get this fucking shit off the air.
Yeah, Loveline was interesting because I fell into that job too. It was right down the hall from the first show that I worked on that I was just talking about. And then the show that I worked on, Pharrell got fired because he got fired from everywhere. Hosts get fired. That's kind of part of the gig. And so now I didn't have a show to produce anymore, but the powers that be liked me enough that they kept me around. They put me on a couple other like New York sports radio shows that I was producing remotely because they knew that Loveline was going to open up pretty soon because Mike Dooley was going to move on and they wanted me on Loveline, which
okay.
Powers that be were not very bright because they probably shouldn't have wanted me anywhere near Loveline because anyone who knew me at all and anyone who knows Corolla would know that like that's just not a good match. So
just push the buttons, Anderson.
Yeah, he likes people that agree with everything he says, and I'm not one of those people. So but I fell into Loveline and it was a lot of fun for the first few years. I ended up being there for 17 years, which is way too long. But I saw a lot of things that it gave me free days, which was great because I didn't have to be there till 9 p.m. And then I'd usually be done by around 1. And I went through a lot of different iterations of Loveline. But when the After Disaster was born, it was kind of born out of the stringent nature of terrestrial radio at the time, especially with our show in particular, because radio had always been fairly locked down. And, that's why Stern left all those years ago, because the FCC is constantly breathing down his neck, and then all the commercials, and you gotta keep it clean and a lot of restrictions. And then at that era of Loveline, we had a consultant who came in who was really trying to make the show buttoned up.
Really?
Straightforward and like overly produced with like tons of segments that we'd have to go to. And I had such fatigue of that I wanted to create something that was much more free and open. It was right at the advent. It was right towards the first couple of years of podcasting. So I pitched the idea. If you remember, like actually I pitched the idea while being admonished by the big boss.
Yeah, you got called in because you were going to get suspended.
I should have been fired because the fuck word was blurted out quite a bit on the air, and it wasn't even our show. I was in there doing the film vault with filling Mike Carano at the time, a buddy of mine, and Brian was too sick with his brain cancer. And so I had Mike Carano and Miss Movie sit in Brian's absence to talk about like Oscar worthy movies that were, because it was the Oscar season. So I had to keep the film vault going, and I was using the studio without permission, just in between Loveline and what Lycus or whatever. I was in there.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but for everyone listening, this is like a multi-million-dollar like heavy dude. This is like a legit studio, and you were just like, I'm just gonna borrow this room for a second.
But I mean, it was a building that had like 6 studios. I was one of the longest tenured engineers over there. I knew how most of the equipment worked. I could go into any studio and make everything work. And, there wasn't a whole lot of oversight, which was another reason why I stuck around as long as I did. I love not having a boss.
Yeah.
It's great. Even though I had technically like 6 bosses, but when you get in that kind of territory where you have like 6 to 8 bosses, you don't really have a boss. Yeah. They all assume that, somebody else is watching over you. So, I mean, the shit that we got away with in there was great. And, but I pushed a button on the board that took Billy Bush off air, and he was on like 100+ stations. He was syndicated, and it piped through that building. And the button that I pushed ultimately switched the satellite receiver so that now our room was live to the 100+ stations across the country.
So you kicked Billy Bush off, then you had the film vault go live out to 100+ stations.
Worse than that, Brennan. I went to get myself some coffee, and I left Mike Carano, friend of the show, and Miss Movies in the studio waiting for me patiently. And Mike Carano was just going on and on about how good Kentucky Fried Chicken skin is. He was just having a conversation off air, off mic with Miss Movies, and he can't say a sentence without the fucking rolling in there. It's a comment to him. So I think the exact words that really upset the FCC in a number of markets were, Kentucky Fried Chicken skin is so fucking good. It's you have to just eat the skin. It's so fucking good. So upwards of 1 million people were probably hearing this in their cars and in their house. Well, either they were hoping to get some Billy Bush This is all before Billy Bush was, talking with the soon-to-be president about grabbing puss.
Yeah.
And so, in hindsight, actually, it was kind of tame, just talking about chicken skin. But yeah, so we got called in. I should have been fired on the spot, but I wasn't. But my big boss was my friend. I started in radio with him on that show that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
I should tell you too. I'm on opiates right now, so I might talk a lot, and I'm drinking coffee.
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's what the show's about, man.
So
we're gonna get into why you were on those opiates in a moment when we get to the backstory. But
I'm rarely on opiates. I hate them. Thank God. If I loved opiates, I would not be here with you right now. I would be one of the statistics for sure. So
definitely.
Luckily, I hate them. I only take them like break class in case of emergency. So we're sitting there, Mike Carano, which is weird because he didn't even work for Westwood One, but he also was brought in.
He was just your friend who was there, yeah, and they brought him in too.
He shouldn't have even been in the building, right? So, so he got called in to be, admonished as well, punished. And my boss, my big boss, was like, "Oh, here's the deal. We go way back, so I'm just going to suspend you for 3 weeks." Turns out, and he knew this. Christmas vacation was coming up. I had already been paid for all of the best of work. So it was paid suspension for a time period that I wasn't going to be in there anyways. So I was not punished at all. I got away with murder. And then we're about to leave, and I'm like, "Hey, while I got your ear, Mike and I have been thinking about doing a show, added bonus content to for the website and whatnot for Loveline. What do you think?" And he's like, "I love it. Let's do it." So instead of getting in trouble, I walked out of there and then with a new show, and that's how the After Disaster was born.
Yeah, and we were talking to Tyler about it because now he's the president of the AD, but he started as just the guy behind the glass to make sure the levels were all right and everything.
Yeah, he was the board op essentially.
Yeah,
is what I liked. I liked him hanging around. He's a smiley face, brings a cheery disposition to the otherwise downtrodden Mike Carano and I.
But now it's so interesting that it's over a decade later and that what the show's evolved into, because I don't know if you get this, but it's weird. I'll listen to those old episodes when Tyler puts them up, and I've like re-listening to them because I've listened to so many of them so many times. It feels like that just happened like a couple weeks ago, and it's like, oh, that was 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever. Like
what in particular happened? Oh, like
when he just throws up the old episodes, yeah, and then you'll hear like someone call in, and it's like, oh, I know that person, but it's like, oh, they were on this one episode like 7 years ago. It's like, God,
it's like a song.
Yeah, it's like so weird because you guys talk about like Meat Juice Guy and Fluffernutter and all that stuff. It's like that's old hat to me because I've been around for so long with the After Disaster. But it's like, oh, that was over a decade ago that you guys started.
It sucks. It sucks.
But was it weird? Is it weird now? Because I want to get into, because the big thing that you do that everyone knows about, obviously, is the Film Vault and the podcasting and stuff. But you also make movies. You've made a ton of shorts. You had Groupers, which is on Amazon Prime. Everyone go check that out.
You got to pay for it again. My distributor switched that around. You can watch it on Tubi. Tubi's a great one. The kids love the Tubi, Brennan.
Really?
Tubi. It's all about AVOD, which is advertising video on demand. So you watch it on Tubi. It's free, but you got to watch a commercial every like 30 minutes.
Oh,
but it's fine.
Yeah.
And it's not like the olden days where they put a movie, an R-rated movie that was made for theaters, and then they put it on your local, network television channel 10 years later, but they edit it down. They make it.
Yeah, I was gonna say everything gets cut out. Yeah,
and they cut things for the commercials, but that's not the way that Tubi goes. It's still unedited. They just drop in a commercial here and there.
Oh, okay, so everybody check it out on Tubi. I remember, but I know that was your big thing, and now you're working on. I don't know if you want to say it or not. You are working on another movie now, or?
Yeah, put a lot of work in last year on it. Obviously, things and the year before things have gotten a little bit haywire for all of us, especially when you mix in a 5-year-old who's now 5, but I'm a stay-at-home dad, and he was home from school for a long time, and I'm not making excuses. These are all real things where like I couldn't follow through. Plus I got a wife who's not real keen on the idea of me giving my life over to another movie. That's independent movies are not a way to rake in the big bucks, and she's a little concerned about her future and my future once she retires, and me just kind of languishing, going, I'm still making movies, but I can't help it.
What was your experience? So you've always loved movies. Anybody who listens to this knows you, because a lot of my listeners are, it's very
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself, and I feel like I already told stories that have been told a number of times.
I wanted to know how, because this is something I've got a couple things that have always stuck out to me that I've always kind of wanted to ask and just never had the opportunity to. So how did you originally, you've always loved movies. I know that everyone knows that who knows you. How did you get into this idea of, I want to make films? Because it's one of those things, as someone who does stand-up, people come up to me all the time. They're like, oh, I'm the funniest guy at the office, but I could never get on stage. Like, there is that weird trigger in someone's head where they go from, okay, I really like that stuff, to now I'm going to produce that. Like, I'm going to do that stuff. What was it for you where you were just like, no, fuck this, I'm going to make my own movies?
I was standing at a urinal peeing after having watched Midnight Cowboy for the first time on the big screen. I had seen it a number of times, but I shouldn't say that, probably a couple times. But they were rerunning it at this theater, and I went and saw it. And
how old were you?
I don't know, probably 18, 19
oh, wow,
years
okay.
old, maybe. And I remember just standing. It's one of those weird moments in your life. You never know, right? And I was just staring at the tile as I was peeing at the urinal. And I was still, just incredibly moved by that movie because it's such a beautiful, like, love story between these two guys. That I thought, you know what, it's a simple movie too, but it affects me so profoundly, and I want to create something like that. I had already had a profound respect for the directors and the people behind the scenes. I love the idea that there's movie stars, and most of them are attention whores,
Yeah.
Most of them are like the youngest children, and they're still going back to their days when they were children and doing a little song and dance for grandma because they loved the attention and the accolades so much. I loved the idea of the actual builders of these things that we're all so affected by. These movies are behind the camera, and you don't even see that a lot of the time, especially when I first really got into movies. Like, I couldn't even find pictures of the directors or the writers. Like, the people that were responsible for the actual stories that I was responding to were behind the scenes, and they didn't need all of the attention. And something was so cool about that.
Well, and I know you talk about the Film Vault being a service, and it's kind of a running joke, but to be honest with you, everything I know about, like, producers and directors, for the most part, the reason I got into that kind of stuff was because of the Film Vault, where you guys would always talk about, like, oh, this director or that director. And that was the first time where I was like, oh, directors have style. And so if person A is directing this movie, it's going to have a style versus person B. And I never even thought of that because I was so, I guess just stupid when it came to movies. I was like, oh, you just make a movie and it doesn't matter who the director is or whatever, because it's just the actors follow the script.
It's about the actors and the story. Yeah.
Like, that's what I always thought. And then listening to you guys, I was like, oh, wait, like James Gunn versus, Stanley Kubrick is like, those are two totally different.
Yeah. It's like authors, it's like painters, it's like anything in the arts, right? Like, you got to have different styles, different fingerprints. And that's another reason why I'm just really, don't get me started with Marvel, but none of that is with Marvel. I mean, Marvel and the stories and all of that is just like what you said. There's very little style we had. Now I don't want Marvel maniacs to come at me and be like, well, actually, when the Russo brothers did, but you don't go to see a movie because of who's directing when you're going to see a Marvel movie, and that's not what got me into movies. That's not what.
Well, as a big Star Wars fan, I noticed it because of the 3 that just came out, the 7, 8, 9, and then versus Mandalorian versus, what I mean, Rogue One, like, because of the people who were in charge, you could really, like, tell, like, some are way better than the others. And it's kind of,
and there's scenes you can tell where, like, they get, okay, like, you can kind of go hog wild with this scene, and then Mickey's going to direct the rest of the movie, or keep you in line at least. So it's all very interesting. But, like, the best was, like, the 60s and then the 70s with the auteurs, and they're all young and coming out and getting people excited about movies, because movies have been in flux and in jeopardy for a long time. Ever since TV found its way into the American home, it's been on the defense, essentially, and you got to give an excuse for people to leave their house, and now more so than ever, because
with the on demand and streaming and everything,
and the giant flat screens that everyone has.
So you were 18, you're standing at the urinal, and you think, I want to do that. So then you decide
it was
to go
also right around the time I was working at the Cousteau Society at the time.
Oh,
for like a year and a half, a couple of years I worked over there, and it was when I still
were
wanted
to
to
do
be
marine biology.
Yeah, I love marine biology, and I just went down and knocked on the door at the LA office, the Cousteau Society. They took me in, which was great because I was pretty what do you call it? Persistent back then, much more so than I would be now. But I was too young to know any better, right? Like it would never occur to me to go knock on a door of a place today. But back then it's like, oh, I found out where Cousteau is. I'm gonna go knock on the door and see if they could use my help for free. I
get shit for that all the time because in comedy I do that constantly. It's like, oh, I run into like a major comic and I'm like, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And people are like, you don't just you don't do. And I'm like, why not? Like, what else am I gonna do?
When I hear that, Brennan, when I'm out there in the wild, especially when we used to do the After Disaster at the Hollywood Improv regularly, I would hear people like you in the parking lot like approaching stand-ups, like big stand-ups, and like David Tell, and like he'd just be trying to go from the front door to his car, and like 2 or 3 people, hey Dave, will you be on my podcast? And I'm just cringe. I'm like, oh fuck. Yeah,
I always make sure to build a rapport first before I ask. Like I'm smart enough now to be like, all right, well, make sure you get to know people before you ask. But I totally understand that idea of like, well, what else am I gonna do? I might as well just go knock on the door and be like, hey, what's up?
I don't think I've ever said those words when I wasn't imitating somebody else. Like, would you like to be on my podcast? I've never said that. I should. I might have to Bill Burr, but I think he had already heard that he was supposed to be on our podcast because our producer had reached out to him. And then I was talking to him about what we might talk. Bill Burr and I were talking about what topic he would cover on the show. But I didn't say, will you be? Yeah, the Film Vault. We're still going to get him on, I think, one of these days. We just don't do guests right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him on. I'm trying to get him on over here too. See, look at that. Worlds colliding.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was at Cousteau. Cousteau went down the drains while I was there. For a while, it seemed like I had the anti-Midas touch. Like everything that I became associated with, like would just go away. Like it would just stop. It was weird. Like things that had been there forever, legacies like Cousteau, like ended while I was in the building. But one of the guys, Elliot was his name, Elliot Cowan. I should look him up. He said, hey, now that Cousteau's, the office is closing up. This is during the LA riots. It's right around that time, early 90s.
Oh, God, yeah.
He said, if you have any interest in movies, I got a friend who's producing one and I can get you on set to do something because we know what a good worker you are. And I'm like, that's random. And I do love movies and never thought, honestly, Brennan, it's foolishly, I thought it wouldn't be, I got this German-Irish thing. Where I feel like everything has to be harder than it really needs to be. I don't take the easy route. And from the time that I fell in love with movies as a kid, like most of us did, I had a real connection, like a real passion for them. A lot of that's because my dad would take me to R-rated movies when I was really young. So they would impact me, I think, more than most people because I had such exposure at such a young age. But I would it would cross my mind. I'd be like, oh, maybe making movies. And I'm like, no, that's too easy. That's fun. You got to do something hard for a living, like be a scientist.
Yeah.
Study sharks and, beg for grants.
I'm Serbian, so I understand.
You kind of got this.
Yeah. That same mindset. Everything's got to be difficult. There's nothing easy in life.
My best film friend is Serbian. Milan Janison. So anyways, he said, hey, you want to get on the set? I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. It was back at a time where I could still volunteer my time for like hours, a day, like 12 hours a day and still get by, when gas was cheap and I barely ate. So I went to the set. I ended up working for, I don't know, 3 months on this. I don't know. I worked a lot on this movie for free. And then I worked my way up on the movie. It turned out it was a movie called And God Spoke, which is kind of, like every industry has their little movie, like Slapshot is like for hockey players. Okay. And God Spoke is that for filmmakers, which is kind of weird that was the very first time I'd ever worked on a movie.
Oh, wow. That is serendipitous.
And it was very confusing because it's a movie about making a movie. So it's a mockumentary and I couldn't tell what was real, what wasn't. I was like walking into frame because I thought they were just having a conversation. I didn't notice that they had a camera set up. But it was eye-opening for sure. And then I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I want to do more of this. And I don't know, 20 short years later, I made a movie.
Well, you went to you did end up going to film school and everything like that with Spieley. Everybody knows that story. You went to film school with Steven Spielberg.
Which makes me sound very fucking old. Yeah.
Yeah, but he handed in E.T. as his final project. That's not even fair.
It's not. I make the joke that it's really unfair because they graded on a curve, but they didn't grade on a curve. No, it was just one of those weird things where film school, at least at Long Beach where I went, it starts off with 250 people in a symposium, and there's so many burnouts that think that they want to go to film school or that'll be their major, because it's for dudes it's film school, for girls it's psychology. I noticed that, at least that's the way it was when I was in college. And if you can't figure it out, you're trying to figure things out. Dudes want to sit around and watch movies while they figure out what they want to do, and the ladies seem to want to figure out themselves. That was the trend when I was there at Long Beach at the place. I'm not generalizing, I'm just saying what I saw.
Yeah.
So we had 250 burnouts, in this film symposium, and then they pared it down from there to 125 that made the cut, and then they pared it down to 50 for the following semester, and then finally they pared it down to 12 of us that were actually in the production class, or 20 of us, but 12 of us got to make films, and it was a really tight knit group. And I saw the roll call one day, and I said, "Who is this 13th student who's making films and is part of the production class?" And it turned out that it was Steven Spielberg, and he had applied. He got, years prior, he was at Long Beach State film program, and they kicked him out. They said, "Hey, you have no talent. You should bail." And he went on and to do other things. So, but to set an example for his kids, he wanted to go back to school and finish.
I was going to say, because there was a reason he went back. Yeah. Okay. So that was the whole reason. I was going to say, because at that point he was already making movies. It didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter at all. But he wanted to do it to show follow through and the importance of education, I guess. I don't know. But he actually was in the class. It wasn't honorary. He was getting the homework assignments and turning things in. And my poor professor had to be grading his shit. And then he didn't show up until the graduation day. That was the only day that we ever saw him. And he showed up and walked with our little program, which was 12, 13, 15 of us.
God, that's
crazy.
Weird.
Yeah.
So then after that, when did you start making the shorts and stuff? That was, because I want to say that was only a few years ago, but like I said, it all kind of blurs together. You must have started doing the shorts a while ago, like Mormon and all those.
Well, I did a bunch of shorts and stuff, obviously, in film school. That's where it all began. And I wasn't one of those kids that grabbed the Super 8 or the High 8 or cheap. Back in the day, it was Super 8 film that you would have a camera laying around the house, but then it became video, and I just hated the way it looked. And I say this to people that want to become filmmakers or are thinking about getting into it, and that's just start as early as you can. And try not to fall in love with the masters until later, because I gravitated towards and fell head over heels in love with Stanley Kubrick at too young of an age, and it's daunting and intimidating to be looking at that and kind of holding that as the standard. Whereas if you fall in love with a John Carpenter or something who makes very attainable movies, accessible movies, and small movies, not all of them are, but a lot of them are, or like early Peter Jackson work, or horror films that you can have fun making something that kind of looks like that with your friends with a video camera. Don't be precious about your early work. And I was just so intimidated. I didn't want to make something that looked comically bad.
Yeah.
So I really didn't mess around. I did a lot of writing, but I took the other route, Brennan, which was, hey, I'm just going to experience as much of life as possible and be able to tell stories later. That was kind of my route. And hey, you can call it rationalization if you like, because it led to a whole lot of partying and drinking and whatnot. But yeah, that was the route that I took. Was I tried to experience as much as I could as a white suburbanite kid growing up in the 90s. But there was very few things that I shied away from or didn't try to experience at least once growing up, because I wanted to be able to write about it later. Yeah, and I still don't get these filmmakers that are 22 years old, straight out of USC, and it happens a little less now, but back in the day, studios would just throw the world at them and say, hey, tell us your experience. And it's I don't really care what a 22-year-old who's been sheltered and went to USC has to say. You know what I mean? They haven't lived life.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because that was the whole thing. I get into that conversation, with sponsees and with people in the program and stuff too. It's you can't, my entire, I think about it all the time. What if I never, because I hated drinking when I was in high school. I always thought oh my God, it makes people act crazy. I'll never do that. And then I got out of control, obviously. And people say all the time, well, what if you never took that route? What if you never got out of control? And I always think about it. And I'm well, my entire set list now is all stories based off of getting out of control. It's all based off those experiences. So had none of that happened, my life would be a lot different. But at the same time, I wouldn't have any of the experiences that I have now, which is what you used to write about.
I still do write about it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not Bukowski or anything. I didn't go to those lengths, but yeah, I think it is so funny because so many kids at my high school were the same way, because I started pretty early, and so many of those kids would give me shit and look down on me and just think of me as a degenerate. And then I'd see them years later and they were completely burnt out and just like alcoholics. And it's like, oh, and so I
shoes on the other foot now.
The best part about considering yourself a writer, and you're not really a writer until you actually sell something. And I still technically haven't. I haven't really broke even really with any of my film endeavors. So I'm not a filmmaker first, even though that's my main passion. I'm still like a hobbyist more than anything else. It hurts to say that, but it's true. Until I actually, you know, sell something beyond, you know, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But yeah, it's still a work in progress for sure. Always will be.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into some of those stories because we were talking about the opiates earlier, and the reason why you basically have to break glass in case of emergency is because of your broken back, which you got falling three stories. What was it? 4.5. So I wanted to definitely get into that. I know some of the listeners have heard it before because I said we do have some crossover with AD listeners, but what
you're poaching?
No. You should see my numbers when I had Mike and Tai on. They only listen to the episodes you guys are on, and then they bail out. But take everybody. Sorry
for repeating everything that I just repeated, because everything I've said to you so far, I don't think there's anything new there.
No, it's all, but I enjoy it. And there are a couple things I wanted to get to, which the broken back is definitely one of them, because that you should be dead for those. I mean, for multiple reasons, but that's definitely probably the biggest one. You were 23, 24 when this happened?
22.
Okay. So you were out of film school. You were experiencing life. You were doing that whole thing.
No. I went to film school a little bit after. I was in college, but I hadn't gotten into the 4-year yet because I was. Yeah, I made it a sport. I thought that I was a genius. I was not in any rush to adulthood, and my best friend at the time was in a rush. Like he graduated high school a year early. He went straight to SDSU, where he graduated early, and then he went straight to Pepperdine Law School. And I saw all the work he was putting in, and he couldn't wait to wear a suit and get in the office. And I'm like, I grew up as a punk rock gutter kid, rebelling against the suburbanite life that I was afforded. And looking back, I realized how foolish that is, but we all have our own shit. And I had a pretty crazy household that I grew up in, with a psychologist for a dad who was an insane person. I mean, he had zero anger management skills, yet he taught anger management. Not only did he administer anger management to his clients, to his patients, but he taught other psychologists and psychiatrists anger management skills to use with their patients. So, I mean, that made me just not think that the system or the conventional wisdom or anything that was in place was to be trusted. That was a very early lesson that I got. I'm like, really? Because I mean, he had no anger. Like, we'd be in public, we'd be in the supermarket, and I'd do something he didn't like, and he would just be fucking furious, screaming, manhandling me. So yeah, I grew up in a lot of rebellion, I guess, took place for sure. But I was a punk kid, and I couldn't imagine myself being an adult, and I hated the idea of being an adult. And I thought most adults were full of shit, and I thought most of them were assholes, because they were. Yeah, especially back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, adults were just assholes. Yeah, they weren't. There was none of this care about your feelings kind of stuff that we have now. No, yeah, they're just mean. So I was in no rush, and what I did was I was just touring various junior colleges, and I think I went to 5. I would just every semester I'd enroll into a new junior college, and I always worked. I always had jobs, so I could hold my own. But that was right around the time that I broke my back. I was in the middle of my my grand tour of Southern California junior colleges, and that all screeched to a halt with a broken back. So what happened? I wanted to just get the full story, because I've always heard you reference your broken back. I've always heard you talk about falling out of a building and stuff, but I think you've only ever told the entire story once on one of the 80s, and it was actually a recent one, a couple maybe not the last 2 years ago. Yeah. So I wanted my listeners to hear that story, because to me it was insane. And I've had people on here talk about crazy stories like drinking and drugs and all that kind of stuff, but you literally fell
50 feet out of a building. So what happened? Take us through what's going on.
The balconies broke my fall, to be fair. So I didn't fall straight. I probably would definitely be dead if it was just a straight plummet from 4.5 stories high. Do you run video on this, or is this just so that you and I can? Okay, good. So no one can see me smoking your douchey pipe,
your new pipe,
douchey pipe. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was out with a girl that I just met 10 days prior. Or no, I met her on the 15th. So I had met her 16 days prior because it was New Year's Eve, 1995, about to be 1996. And I was with my very good friend of mine, Max, who is a very particular type of guy, and just the best salt of the earth. He's like a Spicoli kind of, but really smart and wanted to be a dignitary. So it's him and his girlfriend, and then this girl that I just met 16 days ago at a movie theater. She was the manager of a movie theater.
Yeah, she was,
of course. And so we decided to get a hotel room up 30 minutes north of where we all resided, and have a party for New Year's Eve. And we imbibed a lot, and we took a number of things, including things that make things not seem quite so real. And it was just one of those dumb nights. We were young, 22 years old. And I remember I had a jug. It was one of those jugs, like a milk jug with a handle, and we had filled it with jungle juice somehow. And we walked from the Pierpont in Ventura, which was our hotel, up to another hotel, which coincidentally is the hotel that's featured at the end of Little Miss Sunshine. It's right there on the ocean, and there's parties going on over there, and we're feeling it, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I remember trying to incite a riot at one point, and I'm not joking, like that was a good idea.
Yeah, what happened? I just quick aside, what do you mean try to incite a riot? I
was getting the bartenders to pour me shots like in the little sugar, how we were in the restaurant / bar, and you know how they put the sugar packets in those little cups on the table. I was removing those after making a grand design that other people were interested in for some reason. I don't know, and maybe I just thought they were in my head, but I made some grand design that was going to open something else up. It all made sense at the time. And then I was getting them to pour me free shots into these things, and I was drinking those,
the sugar caddies.
The sugar cat, exactly. And I was explaining to them that it sucks that their boss makes them work on New Year's Eve when they should be out there having fun with their friends instead of serving people like me. And somehow I talked them into giving all of us free booze for most of the night. And then it occurred to me that, only the rookie cops are working tonight. So it's a perfect night to really do some shit, because, like the cops that are working on New Year's Eve are, they pulled the small stick, the short stick. So I thought it would be a good idea. Somehow I then got into a fight. I remember jumping off of a bench, propelling myself, like launching myself into somebody and tackling them. And then it got broken up real quick. And then I apologized. I'm like, I don't know. I was just a total fucking idiot. But I was having a great time. And then the four of us, we were two couples, essentially. We walked back to our hotel about a mile away. Back in the day, you used to just walk everywhere.
Yeah.
And everyone and everyone wanted to go to bed. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was like 2:30, 3 in the morning. I'm like, we're not going to bed. It's like, let's keep having fun.
We're just getting started.
Yeah. So they were like, okay. I was always that guy at the party that couldn't just say goodnight. I'm still I have a hard time just saying, our party's over. Let's call it quits. I just want to keep going and going. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to stop anything. That's one of my biggest problems. Like if I'm fasting, if I'm not eating, I have a hard time eating. Like if I haven't eaten anything in 24 hours, I want to go like 4 days. I want to just keep it going. Or if I'm eating, I don't want to stop eating. It's a problem that I have. But I decided, all right, I'm going to have my own party, and I'm going to climb from one balcony to the next, pull myself. I was in very good shape back then. I used to do this kind of shit all the time, like climb the sides of buildings. And
parkour before it was like a thing.
Before parkour, yeah, exactly. It was parkour kind of before. And that was, my dad was overprotective with things, and he was like, you got to be safe, you got to be careful, careful. And then so I would always just do stupid shit whenever he wasn't around, which looking back is just absurd. But yeah, so I propelled myself, and I was one balcony to the next. I'm on strangers' balconies. I'm
just climbing.
I don't know if anyone like 3 a.m, what the fuck is that? Looked out and saw some asshole, up on their balcony, then going to the next one. So I was up to the roof. I was going to watch the sunrise by myself on the roof of this hotel. And it was the roof. I'd gotten there, and I was pulling myself up. I threw my leg up, and it was already kind of, it's by the ocean, and it was already kind of condensation was occurring, and there was dew. My fingers slipped. I just lost my grip. And I remember feeling weightlessness and seeing my foot above my head. That's kind of the last thing I remember. And then landing on the ground, which was subterranean. It was kind of like down in a level where there wasn't any open sky. It was like surrounded by buildings. And there was a sprinkler. I was on dirt, and there was a sprinkler spigot that was right in between my chest and my arm. So like, it was one of those things where it could have easily broken my arm very badly or impaled me, right?
Yeah.
And killed me. So I opened have you ever broken a bone?
No, just like my fingers and stuff, but never like significant.
But you've broken a finger.
Yeah.
Because like you have to have broken a bone to understand what this part, which is when you break a bone, you can, every time your heart pumps, you can feel the blood going in new directions.
Yeah.
And it feels like kind of like electricity almost. It feels weird. It feels like a little jolt of electricity. So that was happening every time my heart beat, but it was in my body. It was in the core of my body because my sternum was also broken. And two of my vertebrae, one was crushed and the other one was just badly fractured. And I was feeling that in the center of my body. And because of my mind, what was being done to it at the time, because of earlier in that night and what I had subjected it to, I wasn't thinking clearly. So what I thought was, oh, this feeling that I'm having, I've never experienced anything like this. It's horrible. It's awful, but this must be what death feels like.
You thought you were dead.
And I could hear the freeway, which isn't too far from the Pierpont Hotel in the distance, but it sounded more like atmospheric droning. And I'm like, I am in hell. And I really thought that I was in hell. And I probably spent, I don't know, a good 2 minutes on the ground going, fuck, I'm in hell. This is
bad.
Uncool. Why did I do this? And I'm mad at myself for, ending my life early by trying to get to the roof and being stupid. It was one of those moments where like, you do stupid shit and it's all great until it's not. And then you get mad at yourself about it.
It's all fun until somebody gets hurt. Yeah,
exactly. So I was kind of beating myself over my head for putting myself in hell prematurely. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to kind of try and set the tone with who I'm going to be down here by getting up and already doing what I want to do, which right now I got to pee. So I'm going to stand up and just pee in hell. It's one of the very first things I'm going to do. So I got myself up off the ground and I went over and I peed. And as I was peeing on the bush, I'm like, it's kind of weird for them to have like a bush in hell. And oh, look, there's a sprinkler right there that I used to get this isn't hell. I'm just really fucking broken right now. So I felt the extreme pain shooting through my body and I laid back down. No blood. I had a little bit of blood on one of my fingers. That was it.
All internal.
Yeah, it's all internal. So I lay back down because now the pain is really starting to, the shock. I'm still in shock, but usually it's a couple minutes after the injury where the pain really starts to come on, right?
Oh yeah.
And as a football player,
Oh yeah.
And as a football player, you probably get this too. Like when I was playing football, I learned to put in all sports. I learned to put pain in skateboarding. If it's an appendage that I'm dealing with, like a really hurt arm or a really hurt leg, I can kind of put that out of my head.
Yeah, compartmentalize it.
Yeah, and just almost like I can almost get to a place where I don't even feel it because it's like beyond my body. Can't do that with anything down the middle. Everything down the middle,
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, because
that's something that goes on today, and I'm dealing with it as I sit here talking to you. I hate to say it, but 26 years later, however long it's been. Oh fuck, how long has it been? Anyways. So I lay back down and I'm just moaning, and my friends are all in bed, like, in a different part of the hotel way down the way. And luckily Max came out looking for me. And Max is a very particular type of guy, like I said. And he's like, oh, dude, are you hurt? You fell? You all right? Let me check you out. Roll over. So he rolls me over and he's on my back and he's like, let me just check out your back, bro. I used to be a lifeguard. I know what I'm doing. And he's feeling around on my back and he goes, dude, you feel good. I think you just got the wind knocked out of you. Come on. So he gets me up on my feet. He takes me up the stairs to our room. And I remember his girlfriend, who never liked me, was very upset. And she's like, what is he doing? And Max like, he just fell. He's all right though. And then I laid down on the bed and I still think it was like the softest bed I've ever been in. It's so painful to lay in this bed with the broken shards of bone in my body. So I tried that for probably about 5 minutes, hoping to just go to sleep and wake up and everything's fine.
Yeah.
And It was probably about 5 minutes. I'm like, guys, I'm sorry. I hate to do this. I know we've been partying.
I hate to be that guy.
Somebody's got to drive me to the hospital here. And his girlfriend was very upset. I don't think she was even partying that night, actually. Shannon. Anyways, they drive me to the local hospital, and ultimately I find out that I broke my back, and then they transfer me to another hospital. I have a surgery, and I'm off my. I can't even. I'm very lucky to be alive, let alone walking and all that other stuff.
Yeah, because
shards of vertebrae were actually in between my heart and my lungs. Another like just near miss.
Yeah,
or near hit, as George Carlin would say.
Yeah, because you've got the electronic pack in your back, right? Like the little
So the first surgery, I had 2 major surgeries. The first one didn't take. The metal was actually, they had hooks in my. I hate to get all grisly with this kind of stuff, but there was a bunch of metal and clamps and whatnot, and they were not taking to my body. They were coming out of the bone that they were in.
Ever the contrarian.
Through the skin. And so I had to go and get another doctor do a whole nother surgery, like almost exactly a year later, where they had to re-break my back. They took out a rib, and they used that rib almost like cement, took out one of my vertebrae, put the mashed up rib where the vertebrae used to be, more screws. And he did everything. He took out all the old doctor stuff, but he forgot about the little battery packed bone. It was supposed to stimulate bone growth, and it was like a little computer chip at the base of my back. He forgot to take that out. So that's still in there. And I worry that maybe it's going to break down and cause more damage. It's right where I have all the pain, which is strangely in my lower back now. My upper back is where all the breaks were, but it's the lower back that's, overcompensating now.
Have you looked into just getting it taken out? I can't remember if you've talked about that before. Nate.
Yeah, I called the Dr. Nelson, who forgot to take it out. He was showing me the x-rays after the surgery. I'm off my feet again. I literally laying in bed for 14 days, I think, before they actually got me off the hospital bed, the second surgery. I was in the hospital for like 3+ weeks both times. But yeah, he's showing me his new work and all the screws and all that. And I'm like, hey, the computer chip's still there. Dr. Borelli's computer chip. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot to take that out. Just come back, schedule it, and we'll get it out of there. And I mean, I just never did. So now here we are a couple decades later, and I find Dr. Nelson, and I call up his place. I'm like, hey, can you take this out? They're like, no, it's that time that ship has sailed.
Yeah,
that's yours now. I'm like, I don't want it in here. What do I do
now? That's funny. I wanted to because you mentioned a little earlier, and this is a conversation that I've had with a few people on this show about how, like, once you start doing something, whether it's fasting or eating or anything, you kind of keep going. I wanted to ask you, so working on Loveline as long as you did, being around Dr. Drew with, he deals with addicts and alcoholics and everything like that. And then I've heard stories that you've told about doing different various kinds of like drugs and stuff, but you never seem to knowing you as long as I have and everything, you never seem to have had a problem with it as far as like me as an addict. Like once I start drinking, like my entire life is over, and I've learned that through experience. But yeah. you still like have a couple of drinks with your friends and like still hang out and everything. So I've always been curious as to what do you attribute that to? Because you have an addictive personality, it seems, when it comes to certain things, but you've just never been bothered by like I mean, I can't speak to it because I don't know, but it just seems like you've always never had a problem with drugs or alcohol with that.
What I want to get to, and I know I can't believe what time it is already, but
yeah, we've got about 15 minutes.
I was actually thinking about a lot just over the last couple of days, knowing that I could be sitting down and talking to you. And it's so easy for now. I'm a parent, and I I'm worried about my own son growing up and having some of the same tendencies. And it's real easy for adults to say, oh, you're just a rebellious youth and you're rebelling. And there are, looking back on it, there is some of that, I think, is true for sure. But with myself personally, I can tell you that my main motivation in all of the drug use that I did and abuse was trying to become like a different person. Like I just wanted not even like that I hated myself, even though there was some self-loathing for sure. We all have that, I think, growing up, but I didn't like my day-to-day existence so much that I really thought that I could change the chemistry somehow, or I could find that magic pill that would make everything. And a lot of people, they smoke weed for the first time and it's just like bliss. And like, that's them. And now they're stoners and like life is different. I didn't get that with weed. I just, got hungry and laughed a lot. But, I become autistic when I smoke weed. I can't at all. I don't know what happened with my brain, but I was looking for something that would actually change my personality and help me not sweat everything as much as I did, because I've always been exceptionally sensitive, for lack of a better term, and I'm affected deeply by things that other people just kind of go over. I have a really hard time. I see it with my own son, so I think it's a genetic thing. And I was really hoping to get to, like, not to bring Spicoli up again, but here we go. So hoping to get to a place where I could be like more like Spicoli, where like everything's just like, surface and fun and nice, and not.
I think about that all the time, because that whole idea of like Pabs, and I know like it came about as a joke, but that's been me my whole life. Is I'm always super sensitive. I always like take things like to heart, things that people like just mention, like in passing, someone will say something, and then in the back of my head, I'm like, fuck, like what does that mean? Do they not like me? What should I do something different? Like, I completely understand that logic.
There's that for sure. The second guessing, and it's almost like that's a little different. Like you're on a different plane and you're thinking things all the way through, whereas a lot of people are very flippant. And I am. I just last night I read Star Child to my son, because I always read to him right before he goes to sleep, and it's from that movie Come On, which I highly recommend. Really good movie, Come On, and he reads his nephew Star Child in there, and it's just a little book. It's like a 3-minute read, and it's about a kid, a being being up in the stars and wanting to see the earth. And it's a very profound little book, but it's about how they left the stars to come to earth for a short while to live a life and learn to walk and talk and become a parent themselves and all that. And I was kind of tearing up while I was reading it, just like Joaquin Phoenix did in the movie. And Atticus, my 5-year-old, he got real quiet, and then he got fidgety, and then he just didn't want to talk to me after the book was over, and he was really weird with it. And he's got the same thing. He's got the same like over emotional sensitive thing. My dad used to scream at me, "You're so goddamn sensitive. Stop being so goddamn sensitive."
Oh, Anderson,
you can't turn it off. So I was hoping to turn it off with drug abuse. I really naively believed that if, first of all, it was fun doing it with my friends and feeling like we were. I mean, drinking has never been as fun as before I was 21. Once I turned 21, drinking has been way less fun. For sure, because it's not illegal anymore. There's always that getting away with something, but I was hoping to change my personality, and ultimately I did. I suffered until fairly recently from bouts of depression, and I blame that on the hardcore drug abuse, especially the stimulants and all the MDMA that I did for those few years. And I would go just wild mood swings until probably about 5 years ago. I finally am coming back down to earth. But yeah, it changed me for the worse, for sure. And it's been a struggle. As far as your question, being able to, with the hardcore stuff, the stuff that I really probably would have spun out of control with, which is stimulants and cocaine, I had a real simple rule, which was don't have a dealer's phone number. That was it.
Oh, really?
I would always get it through friends, and that was always awkward and kind of like, I hate asking for things, but I would meet dealers all the time, like at parties and raves, and like they give me their number, and then I would sober up the next day, feel like shit, and throw it away. I just didn't want to have.
Yeah, that's real smart.
I didn't want to be able to get it. If you could buy cocaine in the local at 7-Eleven, I'm dead right now.
Yeah. Well, no, and I laugh, but that's true, because I think you and I have similar personalities in some ways. And like, I hate asking for favors from people. So it's like one of those things where it's like, if I don't have the dealer's number and I have to ask somebody to get me the stuff, it's like, I'm just not even going to ask for it. Like, I just won't get it.
Or you might, because it's special occasions coming up and you'll get like an 8-ball or 2.
Yeah.
Right? But it's always an arduous process, and you got to go through this person instead of just like calling straight up. And I realized that early on, like, hey, if you can just get this snap of a finger, you're fucked. So I was careful not to ever do that. Plus, most drug dealers, they're not very fun.
Yeah, they're not. They're kind of pieces of shit.
Yeah, and I don't need those in my life. So it wasn't that hard to keep those guys out of my life.
Damn.
But yeah.
So I wanted to there's one story that Tyler brought up when he was on the show, and it's a story that I remember we've talked about, or you guys have talked about before, but I didn't know the full version. And I don't know if this is an ex-drinking buddy kind of story, like if it had to do with drugs or drinking or anything like that. The Maglite story, where you and Tyler really connected, where you ended up in the hospital.
Yeah.
What was that? What ended up happening with that? What was that? Did you like hit a guy's car or something, and then he hit you over the head?
I was on my way to Loveline. It was Super Bowl 2007, I guess. And I'd watched the Super Bowl with some of my buddies down in Redondo Beach, I think it was, or Newport, somewhere in the South Bay. And then I went home. My wife, who's then my girlfriend, and I just moved in together in Hollywood, and unimportant. And I went home, grabbed Stanley, who was my dog that I brought with me everywhere, and then was on my way to work, Loveline, and I don't remember anything other than a brief encounter with a guy after my car hit his Winnebago. He lived in a Winnebago RV on the side of Venice Boulevard, and I remember being out of my totaled car and him grabbing me and hitting me, and then I don't remember anything after that until I woke up in the hospital, and I was kind of like in a lot of pain, and Tyler was there, and I said, let's get the fuck out of here, what's going on? And I still don't know to this day, like how I hit that guy's. If I swerved, I lost my cell phone. I never saw it again. The phone that I had with me. I don't know if I was, obviously I was at fault because I hit a parked vehicle, a large parked vehicle hard. But I don't know what led to that. I mean, it's just gone. Most of that day is gone. I had such the impact of the car accident itself, and then the mag light hits to the head. I had staples in my head. Obviously a concussion and probably some brain damage, but I don't know. And then that poor guy got convicted of hitting me, and I met him at the first court date. I didn't even know what he looked like at all. Yeah. And he came over and he said hello to me, and he
said hello, like
he introduced himself.
Like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, he apologized for hitting me, and then the prosecutor came over and said, why are you talking to him? Don't talk to him. I'm like, well, I never met him. I was kind of curious. I asked when I had to go up on the stand, and they were showing me the pictures, which were horrific, of my, cut open, broken open head. I said, yeah, but I hit his car and he was probably asleep, and people do weird things. And I honestly don't know if I was being an a-hole when I doubt it, but it's one of those things. I don't know. I wasn't drunk. I would have been arrested and charged, obviously, if I was drunk. I had like maybe a beer with my lunch earlier that I knew I was working Loveline that night. So I couldn't be like, tying him on at the restaurant where I was watching the Super Bowl with friends. It was the Super Bowl where the Giants came back and beat the Patriots. I won a bunch of money.
Yeah, I know that Super Bowl.
And
the helmet catch, Tyree's helmet catch.
I don't remember that. See, I don't remember the game. I remember winning a bunch of money, but
but what ended up happening to the guy? Did the guy got prosecuted?
What's weird is I saw that guy a few months later driving a very nice convertible down Venice Beach with a young girl down Venice Boulevard, and he was like singing and just enjoying himself. He's a very particular looking type of guy.
Yes,
and I'm like, oh my god, there's the guy that hit me. But yeah, I don't know. But then Tyler came. My wife was working nights at the time, so obviously I didn't do Loveline. Tyler came, picked me up after Loveline. He took me back. I think Tyler stayed with me to make sure I was okay.
Yeah, he did. He talked about that. He said that was kind of the moment when you guys kind of like really bonded. Was that?
Yeah, we had already gone out a few times. Like we would go out after Loveline. I'd take him to my local bar, and we'd have a couple drinks. Because by the time you get off Loveline, like we wouldn't get to the bar till 12:30, 1 o'clock. We'd be there just in time for last call. So yeah, like a drink or two, and call the night. And he came around a few times, but yeah, it wasn't until he actually was there to help me, and I made him go take me back out. I had staples. I still had iodine all over my head, blood all over my shirt. And I made him take me to a 7-Eleven so I could get cigarettes and
hell yeah.
Yeah.
God, between that and then you sneaking Jillian out that one time at the hospital to smoke cigarettes, always there.
Terrible. Yeah. But back to the not continuing, meth would have killed me because I didn't have a meth dealer's phone number, but there's two guys that I hung out with all the time back then, Tony and Mark. We were like a threesome everywhere we went. We were always together, and Tony had a dealer, so it was essentially like having there was always stimulants to be had every single day, and I was on my way to early demise with that for sure. And the breaking of the back really stopped that in its tracks, because if you do stimulants, you have any experience there, Brennan?
Oh yeah, lots. Quite a bit.
With doing
quite a bit.
What happens? One of the first effects is after a day or two of being awake is your back starts to really hurt.
Tightens up.
Yeah. And the idea of that, not to say I haven't done stimulants since I broke my back, but it's not very appealing anymore because of the back pain, the constant back pain that I have. So it stopped me in my tracks. It saved my life. It really did.
That's crazy. And that's so weird how, and a lot of the people I've had on the show, we all have similar circumstances where something happens and you think like, oh, this is terrible. I wish that never happened. But it turns out to be one of the best things that ever happened to you.
Yeah. It serendipitous, I guess. And I mean, when I was 5, I got scarlet fever. I mean, and I should have died when I was 5. There's plenty of times where I should have died if it wasn't for modern medicines. So
yeah,
like many of us, I owe my life to modern medicine.
There we go.
A number of times. Yeah.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. This was a lot of fun. Tell everybody one more time all the stuff that you got. Tubi, go watch Groupers. You got the other movie coming out. When are you guys going to start doing the crowdfunding for that?
Yeah, I also moved recently, so a lot of I've only been in the new house for just barely 4 months now, and a lot goes into. I don't know if anyone's bought a house for the first time. They know what I'm talking about, but the first number of months I've found in my experience is like fixing this, fixing that, changing this, moving that. And so it's almost been like a full-time job every single day, Atticus and you're wrapped around with all the other stuff. Yeah. So, because the jobs that I have in the podcast take about 25 hours a week. I got 15 hours a week that I would like to fill with other jobs and or making this next movie. So getting close to that. I'm going to probably this year is when it's going to happen. It's going to happen this year.
Beautiful.
Even this first month's almost over already, but yeah, it's about a group of mentally challenged adults led by one who was undiagnosed, pretty much exacting revenge on the leader's boss. That's what the premise is. Yeah, and that all comes from my time working with Special Olympics and at group homes. I spent a lot of many years working with that community, and it's still to this day the best job I've ever had was working with the IDD, they call them now, intellectually developmentally delayed. That's
awesome, man. See, yeah, for all the nervousness you had about coming off as kind of a crazy person, you're really one of the best guys I know. You're a nice guy.
That's the thing, is I get to like be a horrible person. Usually it's to myself, but I get to be a horrible person because I know that it's not all bad. I think we should all have good and bad, and especially if we want to write and write about the human condition and stuff, you need to be look at it from a bunch of different things. Yeah. So.
Well, perfect, man. I really do appreciate it. Everybody check out the After Disaster, the Film Vault, cinematics.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Anderson, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Check it out. BrennanTComedy.com. Check us out on Patreon /Brennan Tassif. And we'll talk to y'all next week.
Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you, man.